welcome to another episode of Globecast. I'm your host, Sunlight, and today I'm delighted to welcome Global Head of Institutional Capital at Polygon, formerly MATIC, Dean Thomas. So hi, Dean, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Sunlight?
I'm really good, thank you. So could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you discovered blockchain?
Yeah, sure. So I'm come from a traditional finance background. So I started my career as an investment banking analyst at Goldman Sachs. Moved over to the private credit special sits investing desk. Then moved over to private equity at Blackstone. I started a friends and family crypto fund, which did all right. Did all right. It's anybody who bought anything, anything that's valuable. A couple of years ago, did all right in terms of investing perspective. And earlier this year, I got linked up with the Polygon team, and they basically said, "Hey, we have a bunch of money in our treasury. Can you help us figure out some strategies on how to deploy it and how to kind of bring in additional institutional capital into our ecosystem?" And so it's been exciting. We carved out Polygon Studios, which is $100 million from our treasury. We carved out an ecosystem fund to help support projects in addition to giving just grants. We did the first ever M&A deal consummated via smart contract, which was the $250 million acquisition of Polygon Hermes. We have a couple more in the pipeline that we're not allowed to announce yet. And we launched 3 institutional vehicles. The Osprey vehicle, the Bitwise vehicle, and the 21 Shares vehicle. And so 21 Shares just recently announced it's going to be listed on the Swiss, Paris, and Amsterdam stock exchanges. So pretty soon, anybody with a brokerage account, like a Robinhood or a Fidelity or whatever, will be able to buy MATIC exposure using these vehicles. So it's been a very, very hectic and crazy time, as we were talking before the show started. But it's also, I'm incredibly aware of how lucky and blessed I am to be kind of where I am and having this, volcano erupting in terms of Web3 beneath me. And so it's exciting. Every day is a new adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you were talking about previously working in traditional financial organizations such as Goldman Sachs. So what was it about blockchain that really enticed you to move industry, essentially?
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you get a glimpse of it, and you get a glimpse of kind of how the world will operate, it's very hard for you to kind of go backwards in time. It's kind of like once you've used a smartphone or an iPhone, it's very hard for you to go back to a landline, right? And so I think I was relatively late, actually. So like 2018 was around the time when I actually learned more about Web3 and got into it. But once you kind of get a glimpse of decentralized finance, what's possible and kind of the different tools that are currently being built on it, it's very hard to imagine the world not moving in that direction. And so I was like, I can't be stuck in like a legacy institution while the world moves on without me. And so I just wanted to actively take steps forward, both in terms of investing my capital, but also my time and energy in developing my own professional career in that direction. So it was a relatively easy decision once you kind of get a glimpse of how things work. And being, at the forefront of the first ever M&A transaction in the space consummated via smart contract, it just further, verifies that thesis. Because when I was at Goldman or Blackstone, when you're doing a deal, it's like you spend hundreds of hours of lawyers that cost $1,000 an hour, and you're working through item 6B on paragraph clause, page number 230, whatever, right? It's like, and a lot of it is done very bespokely and very manually, and so. Once we saw how it could be done via smart contracts, and I talked about this a lot, it's hard to imagine lawyers, as at least transaction lawyers, being what they are currently in 10 years, because if you don't have at least some component of smart contract coding in addition to legal knowledge, it's very hard to imagine, the world of law and transactions not moving in that direction. It's just simply so much more efficient, so much more fair. You don't have to kind of rely on counterparty risk and credibility just based on their word. It's like the code will guarantee it. As long as the code makes sense, it's going to work. And so once certain metrics are hit or certain specifications are hit, the deal's going to go through, right? And it's not a question of let's make sure that they wire at the same time that we do, and congratulations everybody, and you have a call about the funding. It's just somebody teleported me into a future version of the world, and I can't not see it now. And so it's been a heck of a ride, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity the Polygon's given me.
Oh, that's lovely. So I find it quite funny how you think, joining the space in 2018 is quite late. I mean, of course, it's because you're in the industry now, but it was only this year that Facebook became Meta, and it's not as mainstream as people might think, is it?
No, certainly not. So,
Yeah.
so if you just look at the very simple numbers, like when early this year, I think we were only on $2 trillion in total market cap according to CoinGecko. If you compare that to any major financial institution, so like a BlackRock, for example, they have over $9 trillion in assets under management, right? So BlackRock alone, which is one single asset manager, owned at the time about like 4.5 times the entire industry of crypto. And so from a percentage standpoint, we're still around like 75 basis. So we've ballooned now to like $3 trillion according to CoinGecko or other sources. So that's around like 75 basis points of global asset value when you consider stocks, credit, real estate, commodities, et cetera. And so if you're working in Web3, like most of us are, we firmly believe that Web3 is going to eat a large portion of traditional industries, whether it's finance, whether it's technology, media, entertainment. And so
Or
when that
law, like you
75,
said.
exactly, law,
Yeah.
when that 75 points becomes, 2%, 5%, 10%, maybe 20%, like what does the world look like, right? And so it's kind of like how Wayne Gretzky says, like, you want to be skating towards where the puck is going, not like where it currently is. I can't imagine, and just seeing, I mean, my day-to-day job is communicating with these massive funds, and just knowing how much capital is pouring into the space, how many funds are being raised to deploy specifically in Web3. It's hard to imagine that the rising tide won't lift most boats that are making an honest effort in Web3. That being said, it's really, really important that Web3 people don't fight amongst themselves. I think there's a lot of like Twitter banter about, Polygon versus Solana versus Avalanche versus whatever. I think at the end of the day, we're only $3 trillion, like you mentioned, it's like a baby industry. And so when the next 10 trillion, next 50 trillion pours into the space, how do we welcome them in a conscious manner? And how do we create vehicles that allow for them to get the exposure that they want without having them to like completely relearn everything they know about investing and things like that? And so that was kind of like our thesis behind the Bitwise and 21 Shares vehicles, which we seeded out of our treasury, is that we don't expect other people to kind of learn our world. We would rather create the vehicles and bridges that allow for them to enter our space more easily. And so we're talking to massive fund managers now. And because we created these equity-like vehicles via ETPs, trusts, publicly listed vehicles, they're much more comfortable. Like these massive funds, I'm not going to mention them, but like they cut $100 million checks is the smaller end of what they will invest in. And so if you create a vehicle for them, that's very easy for them to sell to their LPs and also convince the investment committees to go through with. You don't have to corral like thousands of small whales to invest $1 million each. Just one check from a proper institution will get the job done, right? And so I think we're just going to see more and more of that, and I'm excited for it. And also, I'm just grateful. I think if Web3 and this revolution didn't happen, I would probably be stuck in a mid-level manager role at a large financial institution, whether a bank or a private equity firm. And there's nothing against that. I think that's a great career, and I'm very lucky. And you're in the top 1% of 1% to be working at a firm like a Goldman or Blackstone. But in terms of career progression, in terms of just how accelerated and lucky we are, every day I wake up and I'm very painfully aware of it. And so I try and do right by that. I try and do right by that blessing. And that's why we're working so hard, right? Because we want to help bring in that future version of a decentralized computing world to the masses, and one where it's more inclusive and more fair than the current existing one.
You're not only the global head of institutional capital at Polygon, so you're also managing partner at Lone Palm Advisors. So could you talk us through a little bit about what you do there, what your typical day is like?
Sure. I don't know if you follow traditional finance at all, but one of the folks that I followed coming up at Goldman was a guy called Byron Trott. So he runs a firm called BDT, which is named after Byron D. Trott. He was known as kind of Warren Buffett's banker, and like just did a lot of really cool things. And so if you follow the progression of major financial institutions, whether it's a Blackstone, whether it's BDT, whether it's and you can name any number of other firms, basically when you don't have a lot of capital, you start off with like advisory services, right? Whether it's consulting, whether it's M&A, transaction advisory, something like that. And same thing happened in Blackstone's early days, right? So when Pete Peterson and Steve started Blackstone, they didn't have immediate capital, right? So they had to do a lot of kind of boutique advisory services in order to start accumulating capital. And once you accumulate capital, then you can start creating these funds and investment vehicles behind which you can invest alongside. And so Learn Empowerment Advisors is just kind of my ode to the older generation that I've learned a lot of my finance knowledge from. And we started off as an advisory business. And then from there, we've obviously accumulated some capital. And now we are doing more venture and investing activities. But at its core, we want to be helpful partners to folks that we trust and believe in. I think, and at the end of the day, I think it's a relationship business. And so you want to kind of have a tribe and build a tribe of trusted, hardworking people with integrity. And like and very quickly through, and Web3 is a very small space, so your reputation is kind of everything. And so we're just trying to work really hard to help be good people, that people want to do repeat businesses and trust with sensitive information, and want us to grow with them. So yeah, that's what Learn Palm is.
How would you describe the difference between the blockchain industry, like working in the blockchain industry, and working in the previous sectors that you've worked in?
Blockchain industry, I always talk about this. A month feels like a year because it's 24/7 trading, right? 24/7, people anywhere around the world with internet connection is pushing code, testing code, implementing new protocols, launching new tokens, dropping new NFTs. So it's like, it's really truly a 24/7, 365 business. There's no such thing as like weekends. So it's, and you learn, and I think the really cool thing is that you learn an incredible amount in a very short period of time, because you're just doing so much more, and you're also executing a lot more, and the pace at which decisions must be made are significantly faster. Like a lot of deals, you don't really have time to go through like a 2-week investment committee process. Like if you do that, the deal's probably gone by that point. And so you're forced into these high pressure situations where you have to consistently make good, sound judgment calls that have sometimes big consequences that reverberate for many months or years afterwards, with limited information. But hopefully you have a good team around you to help advise and help guide that process, and do research around a lot of the key themes. But yeah, it's amazing. I think, especially at Polygon, the narrative is so amazing because it's just, three guys in India with an internet connection and idea how to solve this one simple question of how do you scale Ethereum and make it cheaper and faster for everybody, became a now $15 billion plus project. And so I was giving a talk the other day, and somebody asked me, "Is like, oh, do you know something about like spam filtering in terms of on-chain data and stuff like that?" And I had never done any research in that space. But what I was saying is like, if it's a real practical problem that you're encountering and other people will similarly encounter, if you come up with a really good solution for it, or at least a leading solution in the space, there's no reason why that can't be a unicorn business or a company or a project, however you structure it. These were entering this brand new white space where a lot of the key infrastructure and battle testedness and things have not been finalized and have not been hashed out. And so it's very much a question mark in many regards. And so if you're able to solve a lot of the problems that people will inevitably encounter, you're going to capture a tremendous amount of value, right? And you just look at the infrastructure plays like Coinbase, for example, right? Like it allowed people without Web3 coding capabilities to access a lot of the assets and tokens that are launching MetaMask, right? Like even though it's a bit clunky and there's a lot of things that can be improved upon it, but it was like the first real kind of Web3 wallet that allowed you to, with a nice user interface, interact with the Web3 infrastructure in such a way that made it easy to use, right? And as we move forward in the space, I only see more and more unicorn businesses and projects like that emerging, because I think we all, when we use a product or we use a service, we all kind of know what we love about it and what can be better about it. And so the people who take actionable steps to actually improve it and improve it for a lot of people are obviously going to receive a lot of value in return. And so I'm excited for kind of the things that are coming up, and I'm also investing behind and helping support a lot of these things that are happening live.
So earlier this year, MATIC Networks kind of rebranded into Polygon. So could you tell us a bit about the significance of this and why the rebrand?
Sure. So MATIC was originally just the initial POS chain or proof of stake chain that was solving that one very specific question of how do we make Ethereum cheaper and faster. Since then, we have both acquired and developed in-house a series of different chains that work in combination with each other. And so the best way to think about it is we are actually a conglomerate of various scaling solutions centered around Ethereum. And each one has its own kind of angle towards how do we solve this problem. For example, Polygon Nightfall, which is a project that we are supporting Ernst & Young with, is a corporate enterprise privacy-focused solution. Polygon Miden, which we recently announced, I think a month or so ago, it's run by the former leading zero-knowledge researcher based out of Facebook. Polygon Hermes, which we acquired earlier this year, that's a more focused on kind of micropayments and solving a lot of those problems there. And so I had a very, very prominent traditional finance hedge fund manager, a billionaire that I'm sure a lot of folks who follow finance would know him. He called me because we're actually doing in the middle of like a strategic raise at the moment. And he asked me, he's like, you've written so many investment committee memos in your lifetime. Tell me why this deal works and why this deal doesn't. And at its core is like, if you believe that Ethereum, EVM, and kind of that Solidity ecosystem that has been developed over the past few years will continue to exist and be bigger than it currently is, or at least the same size than it will be in 3 years, Polygon is almost like a no-brainer, right? Because we are the levered Ethereum scaling solution. We're essentially like a basket of we're an index fund for Ethereum scaling because we either own or control or invest behind the leading zero knowledge scaling solutions for Ethereum. And we are by far and away the most active chain in terms of community. And all of this, so we've exceeded the daily active users of base Ethereum. We have daily transaction volumes exceeding 6 to 8 times that of base Ethereum. We exceed that of Solana, Avalanche, like any other competitor that you would name. We have more daily active users and transactions than. And I think the really interesting thing is that we've never really raised institutional outside capital. We've raised, I think, maybe $5 million super early from Coinbase Ventures and Binance. But aside from that, all of this has been organic, which I think is a very important thing to be aware of in Web3 that's very different, I think, than the traditional world, is that if you have something that the world wants, you no longer need to go through kind of the typical gatekeepers of Wall Street or Hollywood or whichever institutions might be, legacy institutions might be, because people will very quickly realize that this is a really useful solution and one that they want to get behind. And so we've grown from $0 to $15 billion with essentially $5 million of outside capital. And so this will be the first time that we'll be taking outside capital from the big name VCs, strategic partners, et cetera, mainly because we just want them to have some skin in the game and to buy in behind the success of our project. But it's just amazing how the co-founders have kind of persevered and pushed through despite the bear markets, the naysayers, et cetera, and grown largely organically with people that firmly believe in their vision without the big support of these major institutions and funds. Who are only now starting to kind of really buy in behind us. But yeah, it's inspiring and it's very cool.
So ZK Day will be on the 9th of December. Can you tell us a bit about what zero knowledge is and how Polygon utilizes this?
Sure. So zero knowledge or ZK rollups or other things, that general moniker is essentially what we believe at Polygon, at least, is the final frontier in terms of scaling solutions. And so it's an area of intense research, and the solution isn't solved yet. It's very much an open-ended question, and there's many leading researchers and hypotheses around how it can be solved. And so earlier this year, after we consummated the Hermes acquisition, which was a zero knowledge-based chain, we committed $1 billion from our treasury for further research, investment, and acquisitions in the zero knowledge space. And in a very layman's term, like zero knowledge scaling is essentially a way to batch transactions so that you can actually verify whether or not something is an accurate mark on the blockchain or not, without actually knowing exactly what's going on inside it. And so it has a tremendous amount of use cases and applications in the real world, because obviously it would be like, if it were solved or solved to a better degree than it currently is, a really good balance between both privacy, scalability, and security, right? Which is the trilemma that everybody talks about. And right now, we spend a tremendous amount of time and we hire incredibly smart people and to try and solve this question. And so if there's any person or any project that thinks they have a good solution, I would love to talk to them. We'd love to invest behind them. We'd love to bring them into the Polygon ecosystem. But yeah, so ZK Day, we'll have Vitalik speaking there. He'll have a number of massive announcements that so far I've not been allowed to speak about that we'll be announcing. So there's just a lot of really, really good things happening within Polygon that I'm very proud of, and we've been working day and night on to push forward and see things come to fruition.
Right. So we were talking about Ethereum earlier. So obviously there's been the ongoing rollout of ETH 2.0. So what does that mean for Polygon?
If it rolls out successfully, it's going to be good for everybody, right? Because the amount of transactions and volume that's coming into the space is so big that like people would love to welcome solutions that make things cheaper and faster. And so anything that's good for Ethereum is good for Polygon. And so we welcome it, and we're actively taking steps to kind of better integrate and work with Ethereum. So we recently put together a proposal similar to EIP 1559, where we would potentially implement a token burn as well on our platform. But yeah, we work very closely with them, and there's always these memes on Telegram about, and on Telegram, Twitter about how Ethereum is like it's like the father that we try to defend, and there's like that Ninja Turtles meme. I don't know if you've seen it, and Polygon's kind of one of the little turtles, and then it's brought up by the rat master thing, like the rodent master. You know what I'm talking about? And then now that the rodent master is over, and we're the big Ninja Turtle, like we're kind of defending it. So it's I think it captures the sentiment quite well, right? Without Vitalik and Ethereum and everything that stood for, there would be no Polygon. And so, we're very grateful for that. And we're also here to defend and support Ethereum in any way.
The father. Yeah. So where do you see DeFi in maybe 5-10 years, and where does Polygon fit into that narrative?
So DeFi is just one small component. So if you rewinded us 12 months, we had around 30 dApps on our platform total. Today we have over 3,000. And so DeFi is only actually a small portion of those over 3,000. The vast majority are also coming in the form of games, NFTs, metaverse. So the really cool thing about Polygon is that it makes practically possible today what kind of the Ethereum white paper wrote was possible, right? So like, for example, Web3 gaming, which is exploding right now, is made possible only if the transaction costs are what they are on Polygon, right? Fractions of a penny. So like if my character transacts with your character, and my character kills your character in a game, every time if we were to log that on base Ethereum and it cost you $100 in gas or something, it would very quickly bankrupt the game or bankrupt whoever was having to pay those fees, right? On Polygon, it's fractions of a penny. And so as you can imagine, like if you can do millions or billions of those transactions at a very low cost, it suddenly becomes very feasible to have a Web3 game that is fully on the blockchain. And we're seeing this play out, right, with Aavegotchi, Axi's tremendous success. Now a lot of gaming guilds are emerging behind those, whether it's YGG, Rainmaker Games is about to come out. I think that's just in terms of the Web3 metaverse gaming stuff. DeFi, I think we've seen an explosion, right? From the, OGs like the Uniswaps, now in QuickSwap, we have it on Polygon. The really cool thing that allows for DeFi to move at such a fast pace is composability and abstraction. In engineering circles, they would know, obviously know this very well, but abstraction at its core is the ability for you to create black boxes and input-output abstractions that allow you to use something without necessarily knowing how to rebuild it from the ground up. So a good example is like a car, right? Like I don't know what your background is, but I definitely don't know how to build a car from the ground up. But the things I do know how to drive, right? Like I do know how to drive one, and that's all I really need to know for my day-to-day practical purposes, right? Get me from point A to point B, and that's because the car has been abstracted into something that's very easy from a UI perspective. And so in DeFi, we're similarly seeing things where like the really hard problems that people who are original innovators in the space solved, they basically abstracted into a way that you can then plug your DeFi platform into on top of. And so like you don't need to reinvent a Uniswap in order to use a Uniswap or integrate with a Uniswap or fork it. And so we're seeing just like the complexity and the speed of innovation grow exponentially. And so in the past 2 years in DeFi, we've probably seen more financial innovation than we've seen in the past 100 years in traditional finance innovation. And it's largely due to composability, largely due to the lack of red tape that is kind of inherent in any large scale financial institution. But it's also a very it's like new discovered land. There's still like tremendous risks that we may or may not be aware of as newcomers to the space. Not newcomers in the space as we're newcomers, but like as the space overall is kind of just new space within finance. And so there's going to be a lot of people learning things the hard way, which we're seeing, right? Whether it's exploits, whether it's hacks, whether it's rug pulls. But I think inevitably, as any technology evolves and any space becomes more regulated and more fair, as more entrants enter the space and policing, whether self-policing or external policing happens, we're going to see much more larger institutions and larger funds and family offices enter the space if they haven't already. And so I'm excited for that day. And every day we're kind of working towards helping bring in more folks. So yeah, it's exciting time.
Are there any really exciting projects you're working right now on in Polygon that you can tell us about?
Polygon Studios is investing behind a lot of really cool gaming projects. So recently, Rainmaker Games is one that's coming out in December. We have just a number of really interesting things happening, both on the venture investing side, but also we're in the middle of a strategic raise, so we're bringing in kind of the big venture capital firms, partners, etc., into that. By this time, the audience will have already heard from our ZK Day about our big announcements that we are dropping there. So there's a lot of exciting things happening there. But yeah, overall, it's just like if there's anybody who's really talented in any specific area, feel free to reach out to us. Polygon.technology is our website. There's a lot of jobs postings there, but if there isn't a job that directly fits kind of their skill set and they're very talented, I'm sure we can find a spot for them. But yeah, just reach out to us via Twitter, Telegram, Discord. My Twitter is Lone Palm Advisor on Twitter. Feel free to reach me there, or LinkedIn, Dean Thomas. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Sunlight. I really appreciate you reaching out, and this has been an honor. And we're very grateful for having the opportunity that we do, and we just want to kind of do right by that. in whichever direction that we go in, whether it's DeFi and metaverse or gaming or zero knowledge proofs. So we want to do things ethically, correctly, and do it in a way that we're proud of.
Amazing. You just stole my outro. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. And thank you, Dean. And yeah, so we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.